You're listening to the essential WFDU-FM HD1 Teaneck, the New York metro area's premier public music station at 89.1 megahertz and worldwide at WFDU.FM.
89.1.
This is Focus, and our guest today is Dr. Michael Avaltroni, Dean of Becton College of Pharmacy, and good morning.
Good morning.
Now, I must say that being the Dean of the Becton College of Pharmacy, it's just one of many of the hats that you wear, including professor, researcher, innovator, inventor, but we're going to start with the college.
Super.
Tell me about the Becton College of Pharmacy, how it came to be, and how you came to be a part of it.
So it was interesting. I remember, I think it was back in 2008, we actually started with then President Michael Adams, the president of Fairleigh Dickinson University at the time, to kick around the idea of potentially starting a new professional school. And I remember being asked, what do you think of the thought of creating a new school of pharmacy? And I remember saying, I don't know, I'll get back to you. And sort of went on a fact-finding mission and started to explore what pharmacy was about, and more importantly, I think what pharmacy could be. And I remember having an initial conversation with the accrediting body, telling them that we were thinking about starting a school of pharmacy. And I remember them saying, I don't know that we need another school of pharmacy, but I do know we need a different school of pharmacy. And I think that became almost our mantra from the very beginning, that we started to think about how we could sort of take some of the trends of the emergence of pharmacists as having a more central role in healthcare, and how we could train students to be prepared for what is a very changing and very quickly changing dynamic in healthcare delivery, in patient care, in the basic science behind drug development and drug prescription, and really could think about training students for the future of pharmacy and the future of healthcare.
You mentioned there are 5 core values. Think, communicate, lead, advocate, implement. Explain those.
So one of the things that we said was, what would be a non-negotiable attribute that if you were a healthcare professional entering the profession right now, what would you need to be? And what we started to see was that it wasn't all about memorizing facts and being an encyclopedia of knowledge, because let's face it, as you know right now, you could find more information on your iPhone today than you could have in 20 catalogs and encyclopedias of drugs and facts 20 or 30 years ago. And quickly. And really instantaneously access to the world around you.
Right.
So we started to say, well, what really are the skills that a pharmacist going into profession in the next 5 or 10 years will need to have? And those 5 core values we felt were sort of the non-negotiable attributes that every healthcare professional should have. So much of being a pharmacist is really about being an effective communicator, not just with the patient, but with other health professionals as well. Remembering that pharmacists without a prescriptive ability have to be the ones that can change the minds oftentimes of physicians or of nurse practitioner or physician assistants as to why a certain medication might be a better therapy for a certain patient. Additionally, pharmacists are oftentimes the first line of healthcare professionals that you can walk into 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and get medical advice. So being trusted and being a leader and being someone who could communicate effectively and really be an advocate both for the patient and the profession, and then be able to implement all of those things on a day-to-day basis, we felt that those were really non-negotiable attributes that we wanted every one of our students to exit with a degree from us at Fairleigh Dickinson to be able to display those and put those into practice.
Trust. You mentioned trust, and that to me is very important. You walk into a pharmacy, whether it be a freestanding pharmacy of its own or a pharmacy attached to, say, a Walgreens or a CVS. How do you instill trust? Is there a course for that?
There are courses around that topic. There is a course in ethics. There are additionally courses in medical and health communication. There are courses that cover some trust and some relationship building in some of our professional pharmacy practice courses. But the best way to do that is really through almost just on a day-to-day basis, instilling it in students in your actions and the things that you promote and the things that you accept inside the program. So we really try and push very hard that as much of our education is curricular in nature, that much also is also co-curricular and extracurricular and practice-based. So everything we do, we feel, is very strongly attached to a learning experience and to really driving home a point of importance about, as you said, trust being front and center. not a tangible thing you could maybe teach in a 15-week course,
Right.
but something that you can live out truly in a day-to-day basis with a lot of the examples that are being set from the faculty and from the program administration and even from the students to one another themselves.
You came to Becton College of Pharmacy from a background in chemistry. Your BA, which, by the way, was from Fairleigh Dickinson University, summa cum laude, and an MA and a PhD in chemistry from Princeton University. Your area of research, and this is where I look down at the paper to read, is surface modification of titanium materials to facilitate cell attachment, biomineralization, thank goodness I made it through that one, and interfacial adhesion. Are we talking replacement joints here?
We are, and while it sounds very fancy and elegant, it's really nothing more than just taking a look at how we could make hip implants, knee implants, other types of devices better integrated inside the body so that they are perceived more like the body's own rather than a foreign body. So a lot of my research was really around doing just that. How can you, in essence, sort of trick the body into recognizing the implant as though it's its own? Part of one of the challenges, if you look back over the history of a lot of joint implants, you'll hear a lot of common themes around them that typically they last at best 10 to 15 to sometimes 20 years. But oftentimes after a year or two, you start to see people having problems. And the reason with that is really that you're integrating something that's perceived as a foreign body into the body itself. And the common theme of what you see inside anything that enters into the body that's foreign is that the body has two responses. The first thing it tries to do is break it down. When it's unsuccessful at doing that, it actually tries to grow away from it. And as it grows away, what you oftentimes see is that growth away from the implant actually creates a gap, which causes loosening, which causes pain, which causes a whole host and cascade of bad effects. And so we were trying to put coatings on these implants and trying to put coatings that essentially looked just like the native bone around it. So actually growing bone on the implants. And we were actually successful in doing some of that and started to see that the implants were actually better adhered to the body. They stayed longer, they held tighter, and they actually had less side effects. And so that was some of the research that sort of led me in the direction of a lot of the integration between the basic sciences and healthcare, which is where I am today still.
Have we made enough advancement that if someone were to have a hip replacement or a knee replacement, that they would never have to go back and have another one?
We're getting towards that end. You're actually seeing a lot of these interfaces being introduced into a lot of devices. And so each year you see that the sort of generations of these new devices get better and better. People who had them done 20 or 30 years ago and what they actually have today, the surgeries are less invasive, the recovery time is quicker, and the implants themselves are more stable due to the fact that they're lighter weight with using some fancier, newer space-age alloys, but also then putting these coatings on top to make sure that they're effectively integrated and you see less of this reaction or less of this rejection that's very common.
And that's going to be very important to a lot of people, as those of us who are getting on in years and facing these replacement surgeries, to not feel that, oh gosh, when I'm 85 or 90, I'm going to have this redone.
And that's exactly what the big challenge was. Oftentimes they would actually prolong people having them done until they were a little bit older, with the concern that it's a very invasive surgery with an extensive recovery time. They are, of course, cutting you open. You don't want to have to undergo that surgery 3 or 4 times. So if you're someone who is in your 30s or 40s in need of an implant,
right,
oftentimes they would say we have to wait and prolong as far as possible. Now you're seeing there's less resistance to that, and that means people living a higher quality of life because there's not as much pain, discomfort, and not a lot of these attempts to really circumvent something that's unfortunately going to be inevitable.
Now, one of your teaching roles has been Introduction to Forensic Science, and I bring this up. You've worked with chemistry and a number of other areas, but I bring this up: the application of methods and techniques to the investigation of crime. It just sounds interesting, and with shows like CSI, does this bring the student in?
That I found was probably one of the easiest courses to be able to relate day-to-day living and get students engaged and fascinated without a whole lot of effort, because you're absolutely right. So much of what we know and so much, I think, of what the general public is fascinated by is this real curiosity towards crime and the perfect crime and how to solve crimes and how to really use technology, which is so commonly done, DNA matching and other types of forensic evidence collection, to really come up with things that even just a few years ago would have been impossible to solve or impossible to figure out. And so actually I have very little background in that, but what's fascinating to me is that when you have a certain skill set, chemistry in this case, really the translation and application is just a matter of going and doing a little bit of homework. So the chemistry principles that hold true in a general chemistry lab or an organic chemistry lab hold true inside forensic science. It's just a matter of finding out how to apply them. And I always find that one of the best challenges, but also one of the best learning experiences, is taking that application and really thinking a little bit outside the box. And I think for me, that was one of those places where I was a little outside my comfort zone, but learning a lot and really being able to teach students a lot about how general chemistry knowledge can apply across principles, whether it be inside a lab or inside a crime scene or anywhere else for that matter.
Well, speaking of science, and in the interest of raising the American and more specifically a student's interest in science, you are active in something called IETSM, the Institute for the Enhancement of Teaching Science and Math. Now, I know this is geared toward teachers, but explain what it is, how it works, and what you hope to get from it.
So one of the things we thought about was we were looking at some of the things that we were seeing in higher education was that students, by the time they get to us, oftentimes they're either really interested in science or want no part of it. And I think what we saw was that the people who are interested are typically a small subsection, and a much more predominant number really want to stay as far away as possible. And so we started to think about how you can take a step back from higher ed. At this point, honestly, it's a little late to be able to change someone's mind and cause them to become fascinated in something that they've never been comfortable in since probably the early grades. So we started to look at how we could get involved in really mostly kindergarten through 8th grade education to try and make science more fun, more applicable, more comfortable in many respects, so that students really saw the amazement in it and saw the fascination and saw the opportunity in it. But we felt strongly that in order to do that, we had to really go through the teachers. Oftentimes what's very common, particularly in the earlier grades, is that teachers are more generalists. They're comfortable teaching everything in the earlier grades, but they're not science trained per se. And so one of the things we started to look at was how to get teachers a little bit more comfortable with some of the concepts of science that they may not have ever delved that deep into. And so a lot of it was really, more than anything, thinking about methods, not so much the concepts themselves. How do you take mathematics, which can often be sort of thought of as dry and boring, and give real-world applications to math, whether it be using things that kids really enjoy, whether it be sports or other activities, music, other sorts of things, all of which have a basis in mathematics. Whether you're calculating a baseball batting average or you're calculating the musical scales, there's a mathematical component to that. So how do you apply these sort of hands-on manipulative concepts to really think about how to engage students, get them excited, and not get them sort of running from science, but rather running to science?
And I would imagine that a good teacher can actually turn things around. In 6th grade, I had a teacher, Mrs. Jeanette. And of course, that was the days when you learned a little English, you learned a little math, you learned a little science. She loved science. And in particular, she loved astronomy. And she had us all come down to the school one night with our parents and got us ice cream, which helped. And we looked at constellations and we charted maps. Now, I did not end up going into science, but that moment has stuck with me my whole life. Do we need more moments like that?
I think that's exactly spot on. I think we need more of those sort of aha moments where you realize that even if you're not going to pursue a full-fledged career in astronomy or in chemistry or anything else, and there are very few people that likely will end up that way. I think the key is to really get an appreciation for the concepts themselves and to be really fascinated and engaged with that. And, when you think about it, a lot of the issues that face us as parents, as voters, as just general sort of humanitarians revolve around science. So whether it be a topic on healthcare and what's equitable and fair, whether it be about global warming and whether it be about whatever these things are, whether or not you're ever going to pursue a career, having a fundamental of understanding of the concepts themselves makes you a more informed citizen, and it also allows you to really gain an appreciation for, even in your own area, whatever that may be, of how organized and how ordered the world really is according to these basic scientific principles. So for every one person that may end up in a career in science, there may be 100 others who don't, but having at least a comfortable level of understanding and a level of appreciation, I think, goes a long way in just making good decisions, whatever they may be.
Did you know from an early age?
You know, it's interesting. My story actually was that I knew from an early age that I wanted to do something in science. And my story was such that I thought I was going to go down a career towards medicine. And somehow my registration here at Fairleigh Dickinson got lost somewhere along the process. And the only courses that were open when I went to go register were courses in general chemistry and a couple of others. And the first semester I took general chemistry, and by the end of the first semester I changed my major and was pursuing a career, again, on the basis of an instructor who took an interest in me and my appreciation for the science. And I often say my future was destined by a 19-cent postcard that ended up lost somewhere, but it ended up being sort of a calling for me that I was fascinated by and interested in, but often on the basis of who was teaching as much as the subject itself.
Absolutely, and that is so important. I think that some students are fearful of math and science. They view it as, it's too hard. I don't want to do this. And so by bringing it down to a level that is understandable and exciting, it can change a complete outlook.
Absolutely. And you just see it, and you see those sort of moments where students realize that the concepts that are all around them have a basis and have an origin and have a real fundamental sort of tie together. And I think when those moments happen, students have to get interested. There's just no other way. You have to be fascinated by how the world works and how your body works and how all of those simple things that you take for granted have a fundamental origin that you can get an appreciation for and an understanding for through these concepts.
Absolutely. We're going to get back now to the Becton College of Pharmacy. We are talking today with Dr. Michael Avaltroni, Dean of the Becton College of Pharmacy. Now, you've spearheaded a program that is aimed toward innovation to train pharmacists for the challenges of the 21st century. What are those challenges?
So I think one of the challenges that we're clearly seeing play out before us, and I don't think anybody could have even predicted how or what the ramifications would be, is just the basis of how healthcare is taking shape in this country. The fact that with the Affordable Care Act and its creation, no matter which side you stand on or what your beliefs are, the realities are such that we see more and more people who have access to healthcare and less primary care providers to be able to provide that access. And so what you oftentimes see as projections is that in the next 10 to 15 years, shortages, some people say upwards of 80,000 primary care providers. So you're going to see a real, so almost in essence, sort of a crisis point. But what we see is a crisis point is also a point of opportunity for pharmacy. And the reason that I say that is that there's not going to be any one health profession that's going to step in to fill that void of primary care providers. Every healthcare profession will have a role in stepping in. And we're seeing that already. Nurse practitioners and physician assistants are taking on a lot of the roles that a physician would have done 10, 20, 30 years before. We're seeing that in pharmacy as well. An example of this is that you can now walk in and get instant access to vaccination, which is unheard of 20 years ago. And when pharmacists 20 years ago were granted the authorization to immunize, that was sort of thought of as a moment of question. And now 20 years later, it's become the default place that you would think of going for a flu shot or for travel vaccines or for other things like that. I think the fact that pharmacists have such accessibility and that ability to be a trusted professional who is there at a moment's notice without an appointment, without any sort of a prior authorization, without really any need for even insurance or anything else, they're dispensers of advice, dispensers of medication, dispensers of their expertise. I think you see a lot of roles that pharmacists can continue to take on in the future that will continue to expand their role on a healthcare team and will continue to change the way in which medicine in itself is practiced. And so I think for all of us, we're excited by thinking a little bit outside the box at how pharmacy can take on a new shape and a new role and can continue to do things like immunization and other types of basic assessment where they can go and be treating patients. They can be looking at chronic disease state management. For example, someone who's a diabetic. After they've been diagnosed as a diabetic, most of their care plan has to do with regulating their medications, insulin or others. A pharmacist can do that as effectively as other healthcare providers if given the opportunity and the right tools. So there's an opportunity there for a lot of these chronic diseases to be managed inside the local pharmacy rather than to have to wait for weeks at a time to go and get an appointment and see a specialist and then sort of, in many cases, not be satisfied in many respects with the answer or the outcome. So we're hopeful that a lot of this new day for pharmacy and this new day for healthcare will really mean that there's room at the table for everyone. And I think that's what we're preparing our students for and fully expecting that they'll be engaged in once they're out at practice.
Is that what you mean by specialty pharmacy?
Specialty pharmacy has more of its connotation on medications that are classified as specialty because of the very sort of boutiqued class or treatment plan for the drug itself. So specialty pharmacy is thought of as a place where you would oftentimes be seeing not your typical formulary of drugs, not your antibiotics or your antihypertensives or others, but rather classes of drugs around oftentimes rarer diseases, things like rheumatoid arthritis or hepatitis C or other drug areas where a lot of these treatment plans are very specialized, have to be very closely monitored for side effects and for interactions, and are also oftentimes very costly. So that specialty drug market right now is starting to grow and emerge. Many projections say that by 2018, about 50% of drug spending will be on specialty formularies. And that's going to be another crisis tipping point for the American healthcare system as well, because with these specialty treatments goes a higher quality of living, but also a much higher cost of treatment. So, for example, hepatitis C can now be managed very effectively and in many respects cured, but the treatment for cure is about $80,000 for the drug regimen. And now we're up against a different dilemma, not about should we or shouldn't we give it, but how do we pay for it? And that's going to be where a lot of specialty pharmacy debate will continue to take its shape.
You had mentioned that pharmacists basically have to walk both sides of the road. They have to be able to talk with the doctor, but also talk with the person that's showing up at the pharmacy counter. Do you see pharmacists, because of their unique interaction with patients/customers, being able to understand their needs almost in a better way than the physician?
I think one of the things that pharmacists have the luxury of is having two things. First of all, oftentimes they have the time to be able to sit down and truly listen to hear what's going on. You know, as you know, if you've seen any physician, oftentimes they're pressed for time because they've got a waiting room full of patients,
Right.
and they have to see more and more in order to be able to just sort of stay afloat in their practice. A pharmacist can take a step back and get a little bit more of a perspective. Additionally, a pharmacist can see if 3 or 4 physicians are prescribing for a given patient, maybe a general practitioner and a cardiologist and another specialist or 2 mixed in. Oftentimes they'll see things that are either duplicative in nature, will be working for cross purposes, can be better streamlined. And so they have the ability to really see a patient profile that oftentimes is somewhat of a snapshot to one physician or another. So I think there's a lot of that real ability to have access to a bigger picture and a little bit more of a hands-on picture up front than you might be used to, as I said, if you were stopping into a crowded office somewhere and trying to just get in and get out. And I think that is one of the things that we see is really why communication is so paramount to the role of the pharmacist, because they have to be able to build that rapport and that relationship with the patient,
Right.
so that they can see what's going on. And don't forget, when we talk about the major dilemma right now facing many people, it's not about the condition that they suffer from. It's the medication adherence issue. Taking the pills as prescribed, taking them at all, getting refills, and oftentimes pharmacists have a role in seeing when things are going wrong. So, for example, if someone is prescribed a 30-day regimen of a blood pressure medication, after 30 days the person doesn't call in for a refill, the pharmacist is poised to be able to say, well, something's wrong, because at this point they should be getting more of this. And then you call and you find out, well, after 3 days, I didn't like the way things were feeling, so I stopped taking it. A physician might look at that and say, well, let's prescribe a higher dose. A pharmacist would say, don't prescribe a higher dose, just get the person to actually start taking the medication, and then let's see what happens.
Speaking of medications, you cannot turn on a TV today without seeing an ad for some medication that will help you in one respect, and then in another respect, the side effects, anything from a headache to death. How do you feel about having these TV ads?
I think that consumerization of pharmacy and the pharmaceutical industry has, on one hand, I think been good to provide some awareness of some of the available treatments that are out there to really showcase how far we've come in many respects in terms of being able to treat things that were once sort of a death sentence and now are very manageable. On the other hand, and I think the much more predominant hand, I think they've really provided now a consumerism aspect that is dangerous. You hear all the time of patients going in and saying, I want this drug because I saw it on TV and I think I've got that condition, not knowing anything at all about how to diagnose that specific condition, but rather just seeing the commercial and saying, well, my symptoms sound like those. I think we've seen that more and more now. I think that pharmaceutical manufacturers are really playing to a different market. The drug rep used to be the one that would sort of try and get a physician to go in and create that as part of the prescribing plan. They're now, in essence, bypassing everyone and going straight to the consumer. And the consumer is oftentimes just not aware of or not educated on what it is that they're talking about to the point where they can make informed decisions. And so I definitely think it's become a very dangerous road that I don't see anytime soon changing path. But I see more and more, as you said, that the normal TV patterns are such that every program seems to be sponsored by someone who's got a way to change your life for the better. And it's a matter of what the product is and what the consumer marketing approach is. And it's a very different way to practice healthcare.
What would you like to see in the future or for the future for the Becton College of Pharmacy?
I think one of the things we're really aspirational at is really seeing how we can think about how pharmacists continue to evolve their role and continue to go places where they haven't been before. What we've started to see is that there's actually an increase in the number of pharmacy graduates, which some people have said, well, will there be a job crunch or anything else? I personally see that as such a huge opportunity for there to finally be enough professionals in practice to be able to go places where pharmacists haven't gone before. And I think if we were looking a decade down the road at sort of seeing what we hope will be our success story, it'll be to be placing students in areas that pharmacists have never been appreciated before because there's never been an availability of them, that they can go in and they can make a difference and that they can go and be a valued resource, whether it be for the public, whether it be for a corporation or an entity, whether it be for a nonprofit or global organizations, or whether it be for just the profession of pharmacy itself. And I think that's been our goal all along, has been to set out and really try and build a different pharmacist that can go places where pharmacists just haven't gone before.
What is it about the program that you would say you're the most proud of?
I think it's all about really the community that we've built. I think one of the things that, as we were talking before, it's very difficult to teach certain things. It's very difficult to teach trust. It's very difficult to teach community. It's very difficult to teach really that accessibility. And I think one of the things we've tried to do in building the program is to build what we refer to as sort of a very caring, very committed community where the students can learn from us, they can learn from one another, and that we can really model what we think are the attributes and values that a pharmacist should portray. And I think a lot of times on a day-to-day, we see that really exhibited and carried out in our students, in the faculty that we've brought on board, in the staff we brought on board. And just as a team, as we continue to build, I think that's what we're most proud of, is just seeing it played out on a day-to-day basis.
And with the baby boomers reaching the age and the need for more medications, pharmacy and pharmacists, they're going to need more of them, right?
That seems to be the pattern. Fortunately or unfortunately, it seems that the statistics are alarmingly so that the number of people on 8, 10, 15 medications or more just continues to climb each year. And I think with that additional availability of new treatment plans and new combination drugs and new methods to treat diseases that were oftentimes just untreatable, we're going to see more and more of this. And I think with that increasing population, the demand for pharmacy services will just continue to skyrocket.
So the jobs will be out there.
That we are fully optimistic that jobs will continue to be out there for pharmacy graduates in many respects in abundance because of what you described. The increased population needing pharmacy services and the increased availability of drugs to be able to provide. We just see it as a very bright day in many respects for that area of study and that area of employment. And again, seeing the role of the pharmacist continuing to grow and evolve, we also see responsibilities being shifted to that community pharmacy. And you're seeing it already.
It's a win-win. It's a win-win. Well, thank you. You've been listening to FDU Focus and our special guest, Dr. Michael Avaltroni, Dean of the Becton College of Pharmacy. Thank you for joining us, and until next time, stay focused.